I got to tell you, pre-COVID, I traveled a lot. And so I would walk through the Dallas Love Field Airport and think, oh my goodness, we ought to be in here. Like, we truly ought to be here in here. And you know how I am, Tex, kind of like world domination, takeover spirit. I'm like, we got to do a takeover of this airport. And of course, when I start to envision a complete takeover, having the Mavs out there, a whole new look, of course, you know who I thought about. There's one person who I know who carry out that vision for us, and that's, of course, you, Tex. So it was, thank you for really leading and carrying out that vision. Why did you think it was a good fit for us?
I just think, it was an interesting time, obviously, with COVID hitting. And I just think it was something that we could do to obviously speak to the team spirit, but just also to uplift everybody, in their coming and goings. And it gave us an opportunity with the airport being down traffic-wise for a while, that when everybody got a chance to start to come back to travel, they got something that was warm and inviting and spoke to them from this city.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Love Field Stories, formerly Lead with Love. I'm Bruce Bleakley, aviation consultant, historian, and co-author of The Love Evolution, The History of Love Field.
And I'm Miles Hargrove, filmmaker and director. On Love Field Stories, we share stories, memories, and experiences about our favorite airport and its impact on the people of North Texas.
Today, we're talking about the incredible story of a father's kidnapping as told through the video diaries of his son, Miles Hargrove. Miles, tell us about your father's story and your film, Miracle Fishing.
Well, thank you. In 1994, my father, who was living, and my mom, they were both living and working in Cali, Colombia. My father was on his way to work one morning, and he was pulled over at a roadblock, which was a common occurrence in Colombia at the time because of the guerrillas, different guerrilla movements, and the drug lords. There was a lot of nasty stuff going on in the country at the time. So when he saw this roadblock, he thought nothing of it. He pulled over, and it turned out to be a roadblock manned by FARC, which was the largest guerrilla army in the Western Hemisphere. They put him into the back of one of the trucks they had stolen, and they sent him off to the Andes Mountains. And there were witnesses who were there at the roadblock who then reported it to my dad's company. And that's how once my mom found out, she let me know about it. And so I went down to Colombia. I dropped out of college at TCU and went down to Colombia to spend what we thought might just be a few days or maybe a few weeks, but turned out to be 11 months negotiating for my father's release. And because it was such a long-term ordeal. We had a lot of time on our hands, and it was depressing, and we had to figure out ways to keep our mental sanity. And my mom she just encouraged me to start using a home video camera to kind of document what it is that our family was doing in order to get my dad released. It was crazy stuff. We were negotiating by radio from our living room. We had a group of friends that came together and formed this tight-knit team really for the sole purpose of trying to get my dad out. So what started off as home video to show my dad in hopes of him returning ended up becoming an obsession for me. I didn't even know what I wanted to do in my life at that point. I had just only finished my freshman year of college. And I think it was the transformation for me as a filmmaker. And the stuff that I got was so remarkable, in my opinion, that I just became focused for years determined, I should say, for years that I was going to turn it into some sort of documentary. But had I known that it was going to take 25 years, I don't know that I would have gone on the journey that I did. But luckily it was in sort of piecemeal bits and pieces here and there. And so I started on this journey to make the film, naively thinking it would be done in 3 or 4 years. But life got sort of in the way. I had to take jobs and, to pay for these experiences. And I had to really learn how to become a filmmaker. It's one thing to say you're going to make a documentary, but you really have to understand how to tell a story, and you have to understand the technical parts of editing and filmmaking. So I needed to kind of take a number of years just to kind of get that going. And then sort of in the late 2010s or 2008, I want to say, I got really close, I thought, to getting the film made. But our investors pulled out when the stock market fell. And my mom then was diagnosed with cancer. And as soon as I found that out, I put the project down. She died a year later, my dad unexpectedly a year after that. And so it took me, it was 8 years before I could even revisit this footage. But the film, after such a long journey, was finally accepted into Tribeca of 2020. It was a dream come true. I was going to get the whole team, the surviving members of our team, together for the first time. But the pandemic, of course, happened, and Tribeca was canceled. So the film made its rounds, in the film festival circuit, but completely remotely or virtually, I should say. And so I'm very, and it eventually got bought and got put on Discovery Channel. So I'm extremely fortunate as a filmmaker to have my film in that sort of position. But I missed out on the whole experience of sort of, I had already imposed a number of years of self-isolation on myself to make the film. And I was ready to go out and, share it with the world. And then, of course, the pandemic forced us into more isolation. But last weekend, that was remedied by the Dallas International Film Festival. James Faust, the head of that festival, invited the film to come have a special screening. We were supposed to have it the year before. It was going to be its Texas premiere right after Tribeca, the week after Tribeca. But a year and a half later, we finally had it. And it was a really remarkable evening. We had people from the film there, and my brother, who had never really seen it in a controlled environment the way he should have. My sister-in-law, my kids, I hadn't even seen it. So I just needed, even though it was available to them, I just needed some sort of a special experience to go along with it, and I got that with the Dallas International Film Festival. It was a real dream come true.
So, and I know that that was the first time that the Dallas International Film Festival, you said that first time you screened the documentary being present with a live audience in a theater, right?
Yeah, that's an important detail. So it was invited to go back to Tribeca the year after, so last June. I did get to see it with a limited audience outdoors. I wasn't sort of in the theater area. I kind of witnessed the audience from the side. But yes, this was my first time to actually sit in a theater with an audience. And, you know, I think, you know, when you're young and you dream of becoming a filmmaker or making movies or whatever, I think, you know, that is all rooted in going to a theater and having that communal experience with an audience. So that's, for me, as I became a filmmaker myself, I mean, it's just sort of almost like a primal urge, you know, to see how an audience reacts, just to feel sort of the electricity in a room, and you know, and to find out, you know, the little things that have been nagging at you, like, did people laugh at that joke? I mean, simple things like that. So that was a real opportunity for me to sort of gauge how people reacted to it.
Well, it's a phenomenal story about how, you know, the whole story came to fruition as your film. And going back to the actual story, tell us a little bit about your feelings and what was going through, what you were experiencing returning with your father to the States and through Love Field, coming in from a private aircraft from Houston.
Well, so after 11 months of captivity, my father was finally released unexpectedly, and you know, you can see all about it in, you know, in the film. But so we found ourselves, you know, with faced with the situation of having to get him back home. He was in Colombia for about 2 or 3 days before we made that journey. But my dad and I had to leave early in the morning, like 4 a.m, from Cali, which is where we were living. We took a private plane from Cali to Bogota, flew into Bogota, and were taken from the private sector of the airport by the military into the public area of the airport, where we got a Continental Airlines flight back to Houston. When we arrived in Houston, well, first of all, when we got on the plane, we were the last people to be put on the plane. You know, but armed guards brought us on to the plane, so it caused quite a commotion. And then once we arrived in Houston, the FBI came onto the plane and took us straight off, and we went down the spiral stairs, you know, right there at the jetway, and onto the tarmac. Got into this FBI car, and were whisked from the commercial part of the airport to, I guess, to the public part, to the private area of the airport. My dad was able to see his brother for the very first time since the kidnapping had taken place. My dad's brother was instrumental in helping us as a family resolve the kidnapping from the stateside. So, and had great love for his brother, so it was a really emotional moment. But from there, we got into another private plane and flew from Continental, as it was called at the time, to Dallas Love Field, where we were finally home and safely on the ground. It was a pretty incredible experience.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like that. I noticed at the end of your documentary, when you arrived at Love Field, there's a video clip that shows, you know, your arrival there. You're evidently shooting from inside the aircraft, looking through the windows of the airplane out to.
He used those same words. He said that Army kid will kill those guys so they can blame it on the guerrillas. They'll do anything to make them look bad. And he said they just murdered them. And I said, oh, I can't believe that. And he said, oh yeah, it's true. So I just dropped it.
Did he which was owned by Sam?
Yeah.
That's a black company.
We are at Dallas. We're at Love Field.
Love Field.
And I noticed that right then when you arrived at Love Field, I couldn't help thinking about the fact that the time capsule that we opened for the Love Field Centennial in 2017 had been buried right by the same private terminal where you arrived. And that terminal and the hangars that we saw through the windows of the aircraft are still there, but so much has changed with air travel since then. Of course, that was before 9/11, before TSA security checkpoints. Continental is now part of United Airlines, before so many other changes. And it reminded me of a story you told me earlier about your mother as a little girl dancing on the inlaid terrazzo world map on the floor of the Love Field terminal, which now, of course, she couldn't do without a boarding pass since it's in the TSA security line. Tell us about that.
Well, so my mom was an expat, just like me and my brother are or were. So she lived in the Philippines in the 1950s for 5 years, and her family was then on their way to Kuwait. But so they spent like 4 months back in Texas because they couldn't air travel was of course expensive and time consuming without jet travel. So they spent a little bit of time in Texas, and I remember my mom describing as she was leaving to go back to Kuwait or go to Kuwait, how they left out of Love Field and how she, was dancing on the Philippines on that terrazzo map. And so every time I've gone through Love Field, which is as often as, I can, I always, it's when I'm going through TSA, but I always try and make it a point to step on the Philippines, no disrespect to the Philippines, but just to have that connection to my mom. I find that really a special thing, and I hope they always keep it.
That's neat. Well, I think that's a good bet. And even without a boarding pass, people can still look at the world map from above on the Love Landing on the mezzanine level. That world map, by the way, was the first public art installation at Love Field. And of course, since then, they've added so many others, which underscores the idea of Love Field being a gateway to the cultural attractions and events in North Texas, like the Dallas International Film Festival. And now, of course, as your family's gateway back home to North Texas, which now has made your family part of the rich history of Love Field. And, Love Field has one of the richest histories of any airport anywhere. Interestingly enough, a week from today, we're coming up on the 104th birthday of the airport. And on a personal note, I really enjoyed co-authoring the book about Love Field's history. The complete title is The Love Evolution, a centennial history of Love Field Airport and its art. And working with Guy Brueggemann, Kay Callis, and Drema Chavez from the city staff, that was a great collaboration. I really enjoyed that. I wrote the first half of the book, which was the history of Love Field, and they did a great job in the second half of the book telling about the phenomenal public art installations with some fantastic color photographs. I just regret, Miles, that I didn't know your family's terrific story, a very interesting story when I was writing the book, so I could have included it in the book. So.
Well, that's not, thank you, but of course that's not a problem. Things like this, I'm sure, have happened dozens of times over the years, and people just don't know. And the only reason why you're aware of it now is because I turned it into a film.
Yeah, there are a lot of there are a lot of stories about some interesting arrivals and departures from Love Field throughout the years. So that with that, I think let's see, we might have some questions from the audience. One for you, Miles. Go ahead. How did it feel when you first found out your dad had been kidnapped? And why was he targeted?
Well, okay, first of all, the reason why he was targeted was he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And of course, being an American didn't help matters either. Colombia was going through a kidnapping epidemic. It was the world's kidnapping capital. And every person in Colombia was affected by it in some one form or another. And if they were poor, then maybe family members would be taken for lesser amounts. But an American represented sort of the pinnacle of it, right? And so, in fact, the film is called Miracle Fishing, based on the fact that FARC, the guerrilla group that held my dad, they had these operations that they called pesca milagrosa, miracle fishing, where they would set up roadblocks or nets, traps, just hoping for anything. It could be cash or cars, but in this case, it was a gringo, so that the dollar signs lit up in their eyes, and there we were. But as far as finding out about it, I was beginning my sophomore year at TCU, and it was a beautiful Friday, September 23. I had one class, a Spanish class. I'd done really well on a test from the class before. So I came back to my dorm. I'd only been gone for a short amount of time, and the answering machine had 6 or 7 messages on it, which was kind of unusual. And the first message I heard was from my mom saying, "Miles, this is your mother. We have a problem, and I need you to call your Uncle Rayford," my dad's brother. The second message was from my dad's brother saying, "There's a problem. Call me as soon as you can." And then the school saying, "We understand there's a problem. Please call us." Mm-hmm. So, but I finally got a hold of my uncle, and he said, "Your dad was on his way to work this morning." My natural thought was that he's been in a car accident or something, but he said, and he was kidnapped. And it was not news that I was prepared for, I could ever be prepared for. It literally knocked the wind out of me. And I just, I just remember sort of tuning everything else out and just kind of realizing the weight, the gravity of the whole situation. I don't remember much more about my conversation with my uncle, but I just remember getting off the phone with him and then just having this real need to, I didn't know where to go. I went out to the hallway. I went down to the bathroom. I went back up the hallway. I had no idea what to do and who to go to, and then got back to my dorm room and then called my mom. And, and then she said, "Yeah, it's bad. I want you to come. I want you to come down." Okay. So I booked a flight for the very next day.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that must've been really a gut wrenching. So, what advice do you, here's a question. What advice do you have for a young filmmaker?
Well, first of all, right now it's never been a better time to be a young filmmaker because, I doubted whether or not I could make a movie with 1990s video camera technology. I was able to do it, but people didn't just have cameras that had exceptional sharp images and that kind of thing just in their pocket until only in the most recent years. And there's all kinds of inexpensive tools to help you, such as drones and gimbals to help stabilize your images and that kind of thing. So and being able to edit on your phone, although I wouldn't recommend that, but from the comfort of your own home or laptop, or even when I graduated from college, that was an impossibility. And so how exciting is that? But it's not just the tools, it's learning how to listen to stories and to become a storyteller yourself. And you just get that through practice and persistence. I wouldn't recommend filmmaking to anybody who wants a quick, fast, easy way to make a living. That's not who it's for. It's for people who just have just an innate desire to tell a story or to connect with people and affect change or whatever it is your agenda is. You just have to remain dedicated. It may take a really, really long time, but just if you keep at it, and you keep learning, then you'll get somewhere.
Well, I would certainly say that you're a terrific example of that perseverance. So that's pretty good advice, I think. Here's a question. The Dallas Love Field history is one we can all embrace. Where does one get a copy of the book, The Love Evolution? And what about, I have to tell you about that book is that it was commissioned by the Department of Aviation and the city of Dallas for to be published on the centennial of Love Field 2017, October the 19th to be exact. And so it was not intended as a book to be made available to the public. It was a limited run of 1,000, I believe 1,000 copies. And the idea was that on the occasion of Love Field's centennial, it was given out to the employees and the tenants and, you know, the people that were involved with Love Field. However, there were some left over, and so we're lucky enough that the Department of Aviation has made some of those available, and they're available at the museum store at the Frontiers of Flight Museum on the southeast corner of Love Field, yet another cultural institution that Love Field is a gateway to for North Texas residents and visitors. So they should have it there at the museum store at Love Field at the Frontiers of Flight. Do you ever get chills when you fly out of Love Field now, Miles?
I definitely do, for the same reasons I described, like, you know, being able to connect with my mom as a little girl. That's there's no other airport that I can do that at. And it's an airport that has been, you know, a part of very important moments in my life, like the return back home with my father. And even when September 11th happened, I was stranded in Florida with my dad. We were doing a talk about for the military about anti-terrorism of all things for a course. And we were, you know, when commercial flying was all grounded, we flew back the first day that it was all brought back again. And I came back in through Love Field, really, really poignant moments in my history. I love to fly through it whenever I possibly can. And I love what they've done with it. It's with the renovations and everything, very tasteful, very easy, and I always feel at home, you know, when I go through there.
Well, absolutely, and you know, that's one of the things that I've noticed about Love Field as well. You just kind of feel like you're home when you're there, but it's also a very convenient airport, and we've remarked many times about the fact that, you know, it has one terminal, one baggage claim, one concourse. It's easy to navigate around, and it's just one of the most convenient airports anywhere. So, and I imagine Love Field's the favorite airport of a lot of the folks in the audience as well, who are watching us on this podcast. So, oh gosh. Okay. What are some of the stories that stand out to you? Spill some beans. Well, gee whiz. One interesting story to me about Love Field is that it was recognized early on as a very good airport, and as Love Field continued to grow, as after the Army left at the end of World War I, and commercial aviation started building up in the late 20s and throughout the 1930s, Love Field had a reputation as being one of the best airports in the country, and no less an expert than Charles Lindbergh, when he flew through Dallas and landed at Love Field, and at a banquet at the Adolphus Hotel, mentioned specifically in 1927 that this is one of the best airports I've ever landed at. If you continue to improve this airport and work on it and build it, it's going to put you on the map of air commerce in the United States. And he was right. And one of the things that really underscores the central location of Love Field was the Army Round the World flyers that took 75 days to circumnavigate the globe, selected Love Field on one of the last legs of their flight as a refueling stop, because it's in the southern half of the United States, midway between the East Coast and the West Coast. And so that really underscored the again, convenience to air travelers and air operations that for this central location. But as aviation developed through the 30s and so forth, and after World War II and on into the 60s and 70s, here's one other really interesting statistic that I think most people don't know. Just prior to the opening of another larger airport to the west of us, when the last full year that all airport operations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area were out of Love Field. Love Field was the 10th busiest airport in the world, not the nation, the world, 1973, with over 6.5 million passengers that went through that year. That is one of my favorite little tidbits. So back to you, Miles. What other documentaries have you directed or produced?
Well, Miracle Fishing's really the first one that's just all me. When I say all me, I had a team of people helping me, but just one that I kind of led the charge on for years on end. But I've co-directed. There's a documentary called The Stark Project about the infamous Stark Club in Dallas that I co-directed and edited, but co-directed with Michael Caine, who's Dallas's own Michael Caine, who's been instrumental in the Dallas film community for years and years. And I've done some music videos and things like that, but I've probably one of my favorite things to tell people, I mean, not to boast, but people seem to get a reaction out of it, is that I used to do making of documentaries as a camera person, shooting stuff on feature films. And I got to do a number of them, including Proof of Life, which is how it actually all got started, because Proof of Life was inspired by my father's story. And the director was aware of the footage that I had shot, and I sent my resume as hoping to get a job as a PA, and he basically said, "Well, you shot all this stuff about what happened to get your dad out. Why don't you come shoot the making of this film?" And it was a job that I embraced wholeheartedly and worked as hard as I could on, and it sort of led to a whole career of doing these movies, including 3 Harry Potter films. So I got to spend probably on and off a period of over 2 years in London, and got to work on some of the most amazing movies. And it's where I actually met my wife, who I lured over here to Dallas from London.
Okay. All right. So did your family ever return to Colombia after the kidnapping?
No, my family didn't. My dad continued to be an avid traveler. He traveled to Africa a lot afterwards. I got to travel with him to Southeast Asia a few times, and Europe on a project. So it never slowed him down, but he felt like he had pressed his luck a little too far with Colombia. And although he loved Colombia and had many friends and people that he loved there, he just felt like it wouldn't be smart for him to return. Having said that, I did return in 2005 while I was making the film. I needed to get some interviews. So I secretly went down without letting him or my mom know that I was going to do it.
Oh my gosh.
I let them know after I returned home safely. And that was strange, but it was a still strangely nostalgic trip. It's hard to understand now, but once you see the film Miracle Fishing, you'll understand it. There was a group of friends that we went through an incredible, intense time together, and we bonded in a really special way. And that's part of what the film is about. So I'll always love Colombia, and I'll always treasure the memories that came there, even though some of my worst nightmares happened there as well. But I don't blame the country for that.
Wow. What was your parents' reaction when you told them after the fact that you'd been there?
It was a little bit like skydiving, but they're glad that I told them afterwards. They were just glad. They understood why, and they understood that I wasn't just doing it recklessly, and I was trying to be safe. Well,
once again, it goes to the how thorough a job you did with your documentary, and it shows. So
thank you.
You bet.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And looks like it's time to say goodbye. Miles, it's been a pleasure being with you here on Love Field Stories, and a fascinating story, speaking of stories.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I enjoyed my time with you, and I can't wait to actually check out your book.
Okay.
But everybody, don't forget to check out season 1 of Love Field Stories, wherever you get your podcasts. Share it with the people you love. Head on over to Apple Podcasts to leave a 5-star rating and support Love Field. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.